Welcome to the Open Talent Report, the award-winning podcast where we dive deep into the emerging trends in global employment, the future of work, the talent crisis, the demographic deficit, and the new world of work with our expert host, Connor Heaney. Connor is the managing director at CXE EMEA, a company that takes the hassle out of finding, compliantly engaging and paying contractors anywhere in the world. In this podcast, Connor brings you captivating conversations with top CEOs, visionary founders, and industry experts. Together, they shed light on all things open talent and the evolving nature of work itself. So grab your headphones and join us on this exhilarating journey.
Hello and welcome to this week's show where I'm delighted to be joined by Robert Mac Giolla Phadraig. Yes, that's an Irish name for those non-Irish listeners. Robert, or Rob as I like to call him, is the founder and CEO at Skillstack. He's also the founder at Talent Summit and he is the co-founder at Sigmar Recruitment and he's recently exited from there. For those of you who don't know Rob, he's a genuine visionary, but he marries this with an ability to get things done. He's a great executor and underpinning that is genuine likability. I've known Rob since I co-founded CXE in 2015 and his reputation preceded him before that. Rob is a legend in Irish staffing, recruitment, human capital sector, and he was prior to 2015. He's evolved himself and evolved his career, I think it's fair to say, and we're really going to dig into that today. Rob has a fascinating story. And Rob, we're going to unpack that today. So a warm welcome to the show, my friend. How the hell are you doing?
Don't let me get you away. You're doing a great job. Keep that going.
I can't help myself. Oh, Rob, no, it's great. It's great to see you. How are you doing, mate?
You too, man. Yeah, I'm good. I've been busy. I've been busy and keeping the head down, but great to see you.
Yeah, you too, Rob. And thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate that you're building another business, which is really exciting. And we're going to get into that today. So, Rob, one of the commonalities about the show, I think we've done about 100 plus episodes at this stage. Pretty much all the founders and all the people that I spoke with about recruitment and staffing and how they got into it, not many of them were aware of what they were getting into. They sort of had a loose idea, but they might have went to college or school or university, and then they sort of fell into it. But I'd love to unpack, Rob, your journey. Like, how did you go? How did you get into the sector? What was your background? How did you become like a multiple co-founder? I think I've noticed three things that you've co-founded and you're building something really exciting again. So just for, I guess, my benefit, but more importantly, the benefit of the audience, Rob, what's your story?
Yeah, cheers, Connor. So unlike many, I once I understood and got to know a bit more about the industry, I sought it out as it goes. So it's not your typical kind of recruitment founder story. So I guess in knowing what I know now, looking back, it's originated, I guess, in my upbringing. So I grew up in a large household. My dad was an artist, and his work, he was the typical gig worker. So again, his work was fairly patchy, I guess. And my mom was focused on raising a large family. And there's a number of things that originated in that story that run very deep with me, Connor. And one very clear memory I have is actually the impact that my mom getting a job had on me and my siblings, and the difference between, I guess, everything that employment brings in terms of stability, self-esteem, but ultimately it brought like certainty, stability, and it brought like I guess economic hope. It sounds a bit sad, but it created something that we didn't have in the household. And I think that had an impact on me and my siblings. And years later, I guess, when I got to understand the world of recruitment, not just the activity of recruitment, the entrepreneurial side, the commercial side, the activity of recruitment, but in terms of its impact, in terms of the impact we have on candidates and clients, we really are, I think, central to so much more than the transaction of recruitment. And that ran very deep with me. And I didn't see it at the time. I guess I went to a recruitment company. It was Marlborough Recruitment at the time as a candidate. A guy came down the stairs, he asked me what would I like to do. I said, I wouldn't mind doing what you do. And as I understood it, he told me I couldn't do what he does. I needed to get sales experience. I went off for 6 months, but there was an incentive program, referral program, referring people into the company. And I made more money on the referral program than I did in commission. So I got to practice recruitment before I actually went into commercial recruitment. But I went back 6 months later and sorted out the job in the company that I originally interviewed with. Went in, there for 6 months. It ultimately folded, and Sigmar was founded at that time.
Rob, joining Sigmar, were you one of the sort of original co-founders at Sigmar Recruitment? And what was that like, starting a business with your co-founders, some of whom are also legends in this sector, I think it's fair to say. What was that like? What was that journey like? Because, I understand the certainty, stability point. I've talked in this show many times around my own father, who was really, I suppose fair to say, successful as a builder, and then got crunched by the credit crunch back in 2007, 2008. And since that time, he's actually become a gig worker that doesn't have any certainty, any stability, any security, and I think it's fair to say limited protection. And having started and co-founded a business myself back in 2015, it's no easy thing, right? You don't got certainty. In fact, the only certainty is no one knows what the hell is going to happen, right? Stability, out the door, security, kiss it goodbye. So I'd love, if it's okay, Rob, if you're comfortable, maybe if you could share elements of that journey. What the hell was it like?
Yeah, so to answer your question, I wasn't one of the co-founders, so I was part of the founding team.
Gotcha.
Again, it came from the ashes of the company that folded that I was part of. So I knew all the team. It was set up in 2002. 4 founders, so Adi McGinnis and three others at that time founded it. And my memory at the time was, I went from working in an environment that was micromanaged, that was very kind of, I think, siloed, I guess, into something that was just like a world of opportunity. And like, I just saw space, I just saw fun, I just saw potential and opportunity. And also the leadership style, being close to somebody, Adi McGinnis, many folks might know him here. He is a true legend in recruitment. He's a dear friend of mine, and but he was very much a mentor to me in those days, Connor. And huge amount of trust. We were given a huge amount of autonomy. There's words that I have now that we've labelled largely through tech culture that I didn't understand or see at the time, but I experienced all of those things, like radical transparency. The business was bootstrapped, so we just called them miserable. You know what I mean? We just didn't have the language to use at the time, but I just remember the sense of potential, the shared ambition to success. Actually, you know what it was? We had a mentality of being an underdog. So we'd come from what was at the time the largest recruitment company in Ireland. It was the first publicly listed professional service business to a startup. We had so much to prove to the marketplace. And that underdog mentality, I think, suited us to the ground. So we had a huge amount to prove to ourselves and also to the marketplace. And if I fast forward and bring it to maybe where the story gets quite interesting, where I got involved from an ownership perspective, the business grew. We had significant impact early on. And we got to a point where the business was acquired by a company called Newcourt, which ultimately listed on the stock exchange in Dublin and in London. So that gave us firepower to make acquisitions. So we made 3 acquisitions at that time. We developed maybe 6 brands organically. We set up operations right across Europe. So we scaled fairly aggressively. And the parent company got involved in property in about 2005, 2006, and they took on a huge amount of debt at the time. So when the financial crash hit, we were waiting for the final stage of like an earnout that we were all involved in. We reached that number, the earnout never materialized, and we realized that the parent company was in kind of serious difficulty, Connor. So weeks later, the bank called in the debt, and the parent company Newcourt went into receivership. So we found ourselves in a position where we're probably number 3 in the Irish marketplace. We all of a sudden had all of our ID lines, all of our kind of cash flow cut, and we had to go about right-sizing the business. So we did a huge kind of cleanup operation internally, and we took big cuts ourselves for a long period of time. We surrounded loads of leases, and we did deals all around town, all amicably, to kind of reduce and get the run rate to where it needed to be. So after going through those couple of weeks, we maintained profitability, and we just delivered a big number the year before, but our hands were tied. We'd no cash. We'd no cash to pay a big contractor payroll. So at the time it was probably about €1 million. Well, probably, I don't know, 100 contractors, whatever it was back then. And we also had the internal payroll. But again, the last kind of, I guess the cash that we had all went up into the parent company, and now there was the brakes put on. We'd no access to cash. So we had to go through a process to keep the show on the road, to keep the heads in gear, at the same time where there was loads of predatory activity happening. So all of our competition were trying to buy the business from the receiver. They're trying to poach our staff. People were getting their heads turned left, right and centre. So we ultimately, so Aidy and I met with every investor both here and in London, and it was really difficult to raise money at the time. So we went right down the road, Conor, with one investor. So somebody who'd done very well in recruitment and understood the marketplace and saw the opportunity. It was a Friday evening, and we were in our office in Hume Street in town, and we're going through the final throes of due diligence. We had the contractor payroll the following Friday and the internal payroll the following Friday. So it was really, we're up against it. We found out that evening that they withdrew from the deal. And for me, that was probably the lowest point in my career in recruitment. So we sat around the table and said, well, what can we do? So we said we'd try and hustle ourselves over the weekend and try and raise money through friends and family. So we came in on Monday, and it was literally like coming in from your communion, your confirmation, with a pen and paper. Say, like, how much did you get? How much did you get? How much did you get? I literally we jotted it down, right? So over the course of the weekend, there was 4 kind of main businesses within the group, and we were trying to buy the entire group out. But over the course of the weekend, we got a phone call from the principal of one of those businesses. We got a phone call, not from his phone, but from one of our main competitors' personal mobile phone. You know the person. And our hearts dropped. We knew something had happened. So he had done a deal over the weekend to take the business into one of our competitors. So we lost that over the weekend.
Jesus.
But on the Monday, we knew that we'd enough to secure the internal payroll. And for me, that was a defining moment, I think, in that seeded a huge amount of what kind of Sigmar grew to be today. And for me, like, we saw the opportunity with a huge kind of feel-good factor. And what we decided to do that day, Conor, was we said, look, if we feel this way about the business, it's quite likely that our friends and colleagues feel the same way. So we gave an option to all staff to invest in the business.
Wow.
So over half the staff at the time invested. So small money, people, again, they invested whatever savings they had, and we didn't need the cash. All we wanted was, again, people to have a shared opportunity and to have skin in the game, I guess. And people ultimately sold cars, people remortgaged, people invested whatever savings they had. And that went on, I think, to create this environment where people acted, felt, behaved like founders.
Yes.
So personally, the following Friday, I was sitting at home. So I remortgaged an investment property that I had, which was my only property at that time. And I'd saved to get engaged to my now wife. And I invested the money I saved for the ring collar.
What?
I didn't tell her, she didn't know. Right?
You're kidding me,
So
Rob.
it was about a week later. Somebody was telling the story on the radio. I was at home with my now wife, Kelly, and he was telling that story. It was one person remortgaged, or the fella was saving to get engaged. I choked on my cornflakes. She looked at me. The cat was out the bag. So that's how I proposed to my now wife. Getting caught out through investing the money in a savings for the engagement ring. So if I look at it, Connor, in short, it created something very special. And I think what kicked back in is that underdog mentality. Like the original drive we had from day one was reactivated. Now we have something significant to prove to the marketplace. And we went about doing.
Rob, I hadn't actually heard that story before, right? That, nothing short of remarkable. And I think to our listeners, some of whom are business leaders, some of whom are in the HR and procurement community, I think for anyone listening, that'll actually be pretty inspiring and actually bloody hilarious too, particularly the last piece around your engagement ring. I love it. Absolutely love it. There's a couple of things there, Rob, and I want to come on to your new venture, but it's something maybe I've struggled with as our own business in my day job has got bigger. When we started off, we weren't the 100-pound gorilla or the elephant in the room, right? We started at zero. Our European business started at zero, and we've grown quite significantly in that 9-year period. But I and most of our leadership team that are still with us, our executive leadership team, thank God, we had and have that underdog mentality. But now we're roughly 100 times bigger than we were then, maybe more actually. And one of the things sometimes gets lost is that underdog mentality. And we've had so many wins over the last couple of years that sometimes you forget that you're not the incumbent, you're somewhere in between, and that maybe you've lost some of the elements of what actually made you great. And we've had a few kicks in the teeth recently, and you know what? Initially I was like, oh my God, this is horrible, but I've actually flipped it on its head and went, this is actually good, because it's the wake-up call we needed to go back to our roots around excellence, about being fast, better than our competition that are the 100-pound gorillas. And I think there's something beautiful about being the underdog and also having that underdog mentality. I often think as a business leader and a sales leader too, I think the two are often combined, Rob, that it's easier to attack the incumbent than be the incumbent. Would you agree?
You're either looking at those in front of you or you're conscious of those coming behind you. Like, there's never a point where it's only in hindsight that you understand your position in the marketplace, the driver, the motivation, and the dynamics that creates success. Luck is probably the single biggest ingredient.
Yeah.
But I think you can make your own luck. I think you can create serendipity. Think about it. You think about motivation, for example, or confidence. Like, often we wait for it to meet us. Often we feel to be in a confident mood, we wait for something to happen. But if that's an emotion, it follows action.
Yes.
So act first. That creates the mood, that creates the momentum. So whether you're the gorilla, whether you're a mouse or an elephant, like, you're chasing something or you're chasing somebody. So for us, it was in the Irish market, which is a small marketplace, quite frankly. And then we got to another chapter where we felt like we were underdogs in an international marketplace.
Yeah.
So there's always a horizon. There's always those that we aspired to be like. And again, I'd look often at international recruitment companies, different service offerings, and those who are probably shaping or pioneering kind of elements beyond traditional recruitment models.
Yeah.
And we'd look to mirror them and create them. And maybe just give one example. Like, when we bought the business at that time, like, we found ourselves, Connor, like, you remember this in Ireland, like, unemployment rocketed to 15%. And to remind people, the country was bailed out. We were one of the pigs in Europe. So we felt, or I felt, that we could do something about that. So if you look at the pharmaceutical sector, to give an example of looking at another industry. So I often was curious why pharmaceutical companies didn't advertise their product. And I came to understand that they were restricted to do so. They could only raise awareness around the ailment they cure. So again, Pfizer is sponsoring XYZ week. So I adopted the same mentality to recruitment. So it started like this. I committed to my fellow board members that I'd look to meet as many HR directors as possible. And I wanted a reason to meet them that was beyond our service, beyond the transaction, that actually had the national interest. So I said that I'd come up and try and create a job creation plan. So when I rang like 100 HR directors, most met me. I asked them what would they like the government to do to help kind of allow them or help them create more jobs and help solve the unemployment crisis. And I got great goodwill and great activation amongst the community. We presented that plan to government, and over 7 of those recommendations were ultimately introduced as government policy. Wow. They went on to create tens of thousands of jobs. It gave us a pep in our step. It gave us a voice. It gave us a point of difference in the Me Too marketplace, where people saw us showing up in a way that most don't, possibly when we were needed most. And I think that ran deep with people at the time, Conor. Certainly gave a very different sense of us. Again, in the Me Too marketplace, where barriers to entry are low, it defined us as being something different at that time, gave us a voice, and gave us a space that, frankly, we had no business occupying. So from there, we applied that kind of that example of the pharmaceutical company raising awareness around the ailment, the cure. So we set up an initiative called National Employment Week. So one of the ailments we cure is unemployment. So we set that up and we ran that for a number of years. So if you ask most people in recruitment, why do you do what you do? Again, it depends on the marketplace, it depends on the individual. Most people say, oh, we change lives. You've heard it all before, right? For us, in setting up National Employment Week, that actually showcased our purpose. It gave action to our voice, to our feeling, to our mission, and it was aligned with our commercial interest. So we created so many deep relationships off the back of that initiative that effectively created a channel or a community that we still hold today. We've built and developed ever since. So National Employment Week then grew, and as the unemployment crisis recovered, Conor, I rebranded it into Talent Summit. So you and I have collaborated with Talent Summit over the years.
Oh my God,
it's brilliant to become one of the largest HR leadership conferences in the world. It's the largest in Ireland, one of the largest in Europe, and the top 10 in the world. So we, as a kind of small international recruitment business, like setting up a conference to do way more and to raise awareness way beyond what we do as a commercial business, created goodwill, community, pride, identity, and ultimately has kind of raised the bar in terms of what we do, why we do it, and how we do it.
Yeah, I agree. The Talent Summit is one of the best, if not the best events I've ever been involved in. Rob, all credit to you and your team. The vision aligned to that execution part that we discussed it when I was doing the intro around yourself is amazing.
Where were you?
Listen, it's just phenomenal. But the atmosphere, the engagement, like Rob, some of the speakers you've had there, like we had that guy from NASA, one of the astronauts. Was it? I can't remember who it was. The lady, the best one I ever seen was the lady that was the original CHRO for Netflix. Oh my God, Rob, she blew my mind. And I remember, like, you could feel that sort of the hairs going up on your arms when she was speaking and telling her story around the culture of Netflix and what they created. And that's just one small example, Rob. It's tremendous. I know you had some of the OpenAI people there this year, which I unfortunately I missed. But if you're unfamiliar with it, I cannot recommend Talent Summit enough. It's outstanding, I have to say, Rob, and I can see why it's in the top 10 events in its space. But Rob, if we can, I want to come on to your new venture in a moment. But you've recently exited the company you co-founded, whereby you've faced adversity, you've had great success, you created a common mission along with your other founders and co-founders. You got that ownership mentality while still retaining that underdog mentality and still being successful and still being innovative with things like Talent Summit. And I know, Rob, you were heavily involved in Ireland's Gateway to Europe, which is just another phenomenal thing. I was lucky to be involved in this year on the trade mission that we went to on the United States. But Rob, when you come to the end of that journey as a co-founder, and this is something I'm fascinated in, and I know I've asked you about this privately, but you must have quite a conflicting range of emotions. How are you feeling about it all? And how are you?
Good question, Connor. It is a conflicting range of emotions. I'll be honest with you, Connor. It sounds cliche as it sounds, like the journey and sharing the journey and sharing the moments with people you care about. And again, people who showed up for you when you needed them most. The camaraderie, the celebration, like being in the lows and getting through really difficult times is where the learning is. It's where the relationships, it's where the trust is built. And we've had a lot of those. And even if I look at the context around us, around tenure and how short it's become for a lot of people. Like for me, we'd long tenure, we'd deep friendships, and it meant a lot. So the success was sweeter, the lows weren't as low. And we've had a phenomenal journey and truly a great bunch of people. And I think that the kind of culture's now kind of captured it. Again, it's probably in true Sigmar kind of spirit. So during COVID, one of the guys had an idea to, again, just have a reason to get people to convene, not back to office, simply convene. We had a nice space at the back of the Georgian building in the city centre in Dublin, and a group of them got together, literally brought in shovels and axes and stuff like that and tried to do up the garden and turn it into a bar. They made it balls, right? So we had to get some pros in to do it. So we engaged a contractor, came in and built a really nice outdoor bar out the back of the building. So for me, the name of that bar captures a huge amount around the spirit of Sigmar, and it's called the Mehel. So for your international folks, Mehel is an Irish word. It's an old Irish word that means the community coming together for the benefit of the community. So individuals pitching in for the benefit of the collective. And I think the spirit of what that stands for, but the fact that it now is witness to so many celebratory moments, it captures the spirit of Sigmar and what it is and what it stands for. So there's elements of that I certainly miss. The celebrations that we had in Sigmar, like we'd have a great, every year we'd bring the entire team away, sometimes twice a year. So we did celebrate in style quite often. But as I say, being in the trenches and getting through difficult times, that's what the goal is. Like there's gold in the dirt, and I miss those moments, those like sharing the success, sharing the moment. And for me, there was three of us largely who kind of led the latter stage of Sigmar's kind of growth. Myself, Adi and Frank, sometimes feel like I left the band. There's times where I probably felt I was Robbie Williams, and I've come to realise I was Keith Duffy out of Boysa. So I want to do one more tour with the guys and do one more show. So I know, but look, there's a great team there. To be honest, it's in safe hands, and I was one of many who pitched in over the years. So it will continue, and power to it, rooting for it, but more importantly, rooting for the people. I guess you get to a point where you're probably more enthused by the pull, and you've reached a kind of a finish line mentally, or you reach what you've committed to, and that's ultimately what happens. So we sold the business to a French company called Group Adequate. Again, a fantastic business. I can tell you a bit more about that if you wish, but
yes, please.
We had a long. Okay, yeah. So 2000 and Jesus. So off the back of, say, Talent Summit, and off the back of the trade mission that we found at Ireland Gateway to Europe, we started to capture people's imagination a little bit. And we were invited to speak at, again, a number of recruitment conferences, SIA, internationally, to kind of tell the story. And we've we kind of got some recognition here in Ireland and probably some reputation. So as we started to tell our story internationally, it kind of captured interest, I guess, with a lot of inbound kind of queries. So there's very few top 3 recruitment businesses that are privately owned and don't have investment and with a strong kind of position with international potential. So once we had that inbound kind of interest, we knew we needed something different to grow. And to be honest, we had international operations, but when we bought the business and went through the management buyout, we wrapped them up and we sold them. And we made so many mistakes. And again, our superpower in many ways is the culture, and we can't control that or influence it, and not understanding the context in which it's created, which is in international markets, we tripped up a lot. So we knew it would be a hard slog to try and grow organically internationally. So we knew whether we to make an acquisition, have some strategic partnership, or be acquired. So we started to entertain the interest. We went through a bit of a journey, I guess, in meeting with again all the big global brands that you'd know. Some simply wanted to have a land grab in the territory. They wanted to try and absorb us into what they were. We were very conscious that we weren't finished with our journey in the business, so we wanted to see some future kind of potential for the team, and something that we felt probably had built brand recognition or reputation in the market. We didn't want to be kind of sucked up into something different. So we met Group Adequate in London, and when we first met them, we met with the board, and it started off with them introducing them by their name, by their age, by their rank, in broken English. And I was thinking, how the hell is this ever going to work? Immediately I kind of checked it, man.
Yeah.
Honestly, I started going, like, how? But as the conversation went on, we got a sense of them. And for me, like culturally different, very different organizations. So like they were like a top 5, I think, in France at the time. They're like €1 billion group looking to internationalize, privately owned. And there's 2 reasons why I thought it would work. So one was the shared values, and the more stories we uncovered that mirrored our stories. So the story that I'd shared about our MBO during the financial crash, about everyone investing in the business, they too had a very similar story at that time. And it just felt like we've shared a true sense of shared values, which is a great baseline for partnership. So I felt that very much at that time, as did Frank and Adi. And then the other aligned interest was our future. So if the foundation is stable and we believe that we come from a similar kind of value set, and if our future is aligned in terms of our ambition, so they wanted to internationalize, as did we. They saw us as the beachhead into the English-speaking world, and we felt that we had some international potential to bring to the table. So it made sense on so many different levels as we went through the process and got to know each other like any relationship. And to be honest, a great company, truly a great company. I wouldn't have a bad word to say about them. And the measure, I think, of any business really is how you experience the business as you depart. Like I was 23 years in the business.
Wow.
A very strong emotional connection to it. And when I look back, having departed, I think everything stands true what I say about Group Adequate and Sigmar being 2 truly brilliant businesses with great people. But for me, we did a 5-year commitment. So earn-out was 5 years.
Got it.
Very, very long. So it was mutually beneficial, I guess. They got the stability, they got the commitment. We shared on the upsides that we created over that period. But mentally, I had a 5-year commitment on my mind.
Yes.
Last year. And I was ready for the next chapter.
Wow. Rob, thanks so much for sharing that part of your story. That's inspiring. It's actually inspiring, and it's lovely to get an insight into how the deals are done in this sector. And it also shows me that the recruitment and staffing sector has brilliant people in it, like yourself. And of course, that won't be a shock to most of our listeners and most of our guests, nor should it be to myself. But I really appreciate you going deep in that, because I think there's so many important learnings from that, and I appreciate it. So Rob, looking to the future now, which is what we try to do in the podcast, but I really wanted to hear your story and I wanted our listeners to hear your story. I think that's very, very important. But look into your new venture. You're now the CEO and co-founder of Skillstack. We've recorded this in the week where your business is launching. And listen, Rob, I think it's fair to say we wish you every success in this endeavor. But thank you, Rob, and just for the benefit of our audience, what are the problems and challenges that your new venture will be solving for? Would you share that with our audience, please?
It's the skills development video streaming platform. So it's short form, finds the learner in the moment where the learning is needed most. So it's geared and created for kind of three main categories, I guess. So it's broadly kind of leadership and power skills, as I call them, not soft skills. And it looks to start with two entry levels. So one is your early stage career folks induction graduate program, that it can teach the skills that they need to make sure what happens between them matters most. And then for management, early stage management is where the leadership development starts. So your first 100 days as a manager, 94% get zero training. So we've mapped the moments that they're likely to encounter in the first 100 days. And we've looked to teach them skills that they need to navigate that first 100 days. And then the leadership journey develops and evolves from there. And then the third category is values stacks. So what a value stack is, if we look at culture, how we create culture, we often talk about behaviors guided by values is interpreted as how we experience culture. My fundamental problem with that, Connor, is that how do we expect people to mirror behaviors if they don't have the micro skills, the language, the know-how, the structure, the self-awareness to demonstrate and to practice the behaviors that mirror that value? So it starts with self-awareness. Yeah. It starts with understanding that all interaction, all communication starts with creating understanding in the other. So we've built kind of micro skills to bring values to life. So it's just enough content, short form video, just for the individual. You can stack the skills that the individual needs. Just in time, it finds them in the moment where they need it most, just as they like. The pedagogy, I've only learned that word, can't spell it.
Yes.
The structure of learning is storytelling. So it's entertainment meets learning in short form video. And I'll just share one story with you in the spirit of that, Conor, if I may. I mentioned my mum at the beginning of this podcast, and I'll just bring it back to that story. So my mum she had two chance encounters with two people when I was younger, Conor. One of them was a guy called Maurice Manning, who was a politician, he was an academic, and he's now on loads of different boards for kind of government and kind of state agencies. When he ran for Parliament, my mum canvassed for him. He delivered a food hamper to our household Christmas morning, and he became a hero in our home. And my mum held him up as a role model, that if you work hard enough in school, you could be like Maurice Manning. On the other side, she had a chance encounter with Martin Nocton, who you will know.
Yes.
Founder of Glencoe Flex. And you and I would know Neil, his son, very well.
Yeah.
So she knew that he was a successful business guy. And she said, if you work hard enough in business, you could be like Martin Nocton. I have a twin brother, Connor. Both of us fell into those two camps broadly, right? So this is nature versus nurture. So Kev, my twin, went the academic route. He now teaches dentistry in Trinity College. I stumbled into recruitment, and all I could do was let my mom down because I'll never be like Martin Nocton. What I did do, Connor, was actually look very closely over the last 2 years at how did I develop this range of skills that I developed that served me well. And I arrived at a consensus that it's a blend of skills or a stack of skills. And I think a lot of people in our industry, they possess a Skillstack. It's a range of skills, broadly soft skills, or power skills, or leadership skills. And these skills are learned. They're not innate. We might have some of the ingredients, but they're all learned. They're practiced, like muscle. You develop muscle. I saw you in the gym in America.
I like your guns here, Rob. This is good.
No, this is not good. This is a bad day. So how do we create this? We tear the muscle. We need to practice what we've learned. So to bring the story full cycle, I got in touch with those I actually learned from through my journey in Sigmar, through Talent Summit, through Gateway, through the Boston College Network. And I invited them to collaborate with me. And I've built a faculty of global experts. And I've developed the content with them over the last 12 months. And yeah, it feels like my life story in terms of how I learned in today's context for tomorrow's work is what it feels like to me. And to conclude the story, Connor.
Yes.
The thrill of my life was actually in later life befriending the two role models that my mum held up to me, Martin and Morris, and bringing my mum for dinner with both of them.
Wow. Like the beautiful circularity of that, Rob, it's amazing. And all credit to your mum and your mum, as we would say in Ireland, and all credit to you, Rob, right? I think, in Ireland, we have a natural tendency to be, in some ways, I would say, unduly humble. But all credit to you for all that you've achieved and are going to achieve next with your next play, as they say. And I and many others will be rooting for you, Rob, and I really can't wait to see where this is going to go for you and your team. Rob, one of the things, looking at the current and looking at the future, and I actually think there might be a good use case for your new venture for this particular problem. So we looked back to the past and we looked at when Ireland and other pig-type countries, as they were described, had 15% unemployment. USA had crazy unemployment during the Great Financial Crisis as well. Germany, pretty much any Western labour market really struggled with, I think, the exception of Australia, right? But don't quote me on that. But at the moment, and over the last number of years, we've been in the inverse of that, right? Where we've got essentially full employment in most Western labour markets, right? I know some are dipping in and out of recession. When we're recording this, Germany recently reported some troubling GDP figures, but it's only the most recent quarter. But if you look at most of the labour markets, they're almost or at full employment, including the Irish labour market, although John Reardon, a mutual friend, always corrects me on that, right? He says to be more precise, but on an approximate basis, right? So we've got this problem where there's loads of people employed, but companies are hiring like it's going out of fashion, and there isn't enough people, it seems, in the market to do those jobs, right? Because you've got a demographic decline, as in less people have been born 20, 30 years ago. You've got restrictions around immigration and migration. And also, to your point, Rob, I think if I understood it correctly, the education system isn't really setting people up for the jobs of today. And in my view, certainly not the jobs of tomorrow. So I suppose my question really is, in the context as I've described it, is what do you think can be done to solve this particular problem? How do we get more people working in an era of full employment?
So people who are trying to buy time usually say, that's a great question.
They do, Rob.
Right, where's Connor? I share some thoughts, for sure. It's complex. It's deeply complex. And there's so many factors. There's so many perspectives. Like, I'd start by looking at what an organization has. So what's driving the employment agenda? Like, look at what we've been through in tech. Like every tech company bar none overhired. Like, on what basis? I would say largely there was a FOMO, because I saw every other tech company starting to kind of ramp.
Yeah.
I think they thought that the post-COVID economic bounce would continue. But I think a lot of the agenda was driven by investors. Like, it was driven by cash, it was driven by the investor who were encouraging the companies to grow. So they were, in effect, overhiring, and they were backing the potential growth in the marketplace, not looking at it from a workforce planning perspective, not looking at it from an efficiency perspective of what they currently had. So there's external factors and there are internal factors. And I think it boils down to a leadership decision to invest, to grow, to take risk, to hire people. But very few start by looking at internal efficiency, looking at structure, resource, and there's so many parts of that process and that supply chain that are fundamentally broke, Connor. So, like, again, I don't get deep into AI because I know how you debate on this. I'll see you in action, and I don't want to get into it, but I know your views on it. But obviously, that's a game changer, isn't it, for efficiency and increasing enjoyable, productive work. I'm backing the human in what I'm doing. I'm backing the emotional intelligence, the human intelligence on this journey. But there's a question of efficiency internally. There's a question every which way you look at the whole skills agenda. So the reskilling, the upskilling, the onboarding, and there's a real bias still in terms of how we recruit, who we recruit, where we recruit. You know what I mean? So all the components of recruitment, like, quite often, I think we're back to a position where we still look at the best that's closest to us. That's the path of least resistance for highest return for the cheapest investment. You know what I mean? They're just things where we think of when we make hiring decisions. We don't look at more straight line questions around kind of lower cost economies. Yeah. We don't gear work. So very simply, right? Yes. Workforce, your workplace, wherever that might be. Yeah. And then what binds them is work practice. We don't invest in the work practice to leverage where both exist. And I think there's another investment in work practice, but I'd be hopeful that you could leverage that now through AI. Over to you.
Yeah. I love that. I love that idea of the bridge, though, through work practices, because I completely agree with your analysis there, Rob, and I completely agree with what you've just suggested. You know, if I know, but sure, why not? You know, it's about time, right? But like, I agree, because if let's say the demand, Rob, is in the UK, right, for X skill or X person to do X job, right? You're right. Why can't that company get that person in Nigeria, in India, in wherever the hell it is, Mexico, Honduras, the list goes on, you know, high population centers with really good education. And if the work practices are governed correctly and the communication practices and the learning is governed correctly and the onboarding, to all your points that you're making, then that's the bridge. They can still stay in Nigeria, Honduras, Ecuador, and still get the work done. And potentially that work will be cheaper, right? And it also solves that talent availability or talent scarcity problem. But what I love about that model, Rob, is that it also has the potential to bring that local economy up, right? So, you know, let's say the average developer salary in Nigeria is, I don't know, let's say, for example, I don't have this as a fact, so it's just an example, hypothetical. But let's say it's $60,000 right, for the top end Python developer, right? If you were able to pay that person in Nigeria or Ecuador 90,000, imagine what that would do for the person doing that work and their family and the local economy. And then if you replicate that model by 100, by 1,000 people, that's transformational. And it starts to allow those economies and those people to level up with the UK or United States from a salary and earnings potential. I think there's a sort of commercial beauty in that.
Again, that topic, it runs deep with me again, Connor. Again, it's part of my story. It's part of my being. Like, social mobility for me, was achieved through education or work, and that's available for everyone. I think that's this real leveler now. And if you look at the Irish society, like if you look back within our generation or just beyond our generation, we're a bit older than me. Yeah. So it's a bit beyond your generation. Right. But you probably remember this. I heard stories, right?
Well, back in the 60s, yeah, when I was growing up.
I'll leave us millennials alone, Connor. So, like, free education was the catalyst for social mobility.
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
the more Ireland provided, like, talent as it was, and that was all done through traditional education models in its day, like that supply of talent is what attracted the US multinationals. And we went from being a protectionist agricultural economy to one of the highest tech economies in the world within your lifetime and my lifetime.
Wow.
Like that's social transformation. You know
It
what I
is.
mean? And that was done through traditional education models. So part of the design, like I mentioned, just enough content, just in time, just for the individual, just as they like. But the fifth just isn't just cause in terms of my purpose, in terms of why I've built Skillstack. And what I'm most excited is to have, and again, to share my story into a business, but moreover, to replicate the opportunity I have been privileged to be given by my mom, by mentors, by like people around me, by customers, by friends over my lifetime. I learned bits from each of them. I stacked my skills through stories they shared with me. And those stories created action. That action created impact on those around me. For the better, I would like to think, and I hope. And I'm excited to replicate that as far and as wide as I can. And I think there's something in the story of Skillstack, to your point, around kind of social mobility, around accessing like non-traditional talent.
Yes.
Ultimately, it is about productivity in work. That is the catalyst for social mobility.
It is.
There's a real alignment between that investment in the individual, unlocking the performance in work, and therefore their economic future through their performance in work. And that's a real alignment and a real partnership. And that could be achieved by anyone, anywhere. And again, just back to the original point, the work practices need to be readjusted to configure this. And you reminded me of this, Penny McCord in Netflix, who you mentioned earlier on, who spoke at Talent Summit some years ago. She challenged me at the time. And this is when, kind of the contract gig, kind of freelance fractional work was starting to emerge. And she said, why do we still think in traditional ways? We're trying to enforce this industrial model onto a marketplace. Like in any other circumstance, the demand would shape and meet the supply. And we're not thinking like that as HR leaders. So why don't we just make some adjustments? Why don't we trial? Why don't we test to try and do more to meet the employee or the partner or wherever it might be, where they are, and see it from their context?
I love that, Rob. And it leads me to two questions that I hadn't really thought about discussing today, and I hope this is okay with you. But one of them is around that gig worker, right? So I've got personal interest in this, right? As I mentioned, my dad's a gig worker. He works for, as an independent contractor, I put some air quotes in there, for one of the largest pizza chains. I can't say their name for loads of reasons. But like, Rob, I look at him and I look at his existence. Now, his choice is to be a gig worker. Yes, he could go back and set up a business again. He had 30, 40 years experience, but the gig work suits him, right? But it only suits him until such time as he gets injured, right? He got injured recently at work, right? Broke his foot, was off work for 3 months. There was no safety net there for him, right? Because he was set up as an independent contractor, right? And there's millions of workers out there. So my question, I've got two questions, Rob, but the first question is, for workers like that, like my dad and millions of others around the world, I would describe them, and this is a really crude description, right? But I think it accurately sums up their plight, Rob, which is low choice, no choice, right? And what I mean by low choice is, if you're a gig worker, you've got limited optionality in terms of where else you can work, right? You have to do that gig work for a reason, right? Because you haven't had that social mobility. You might not have that cultural capital. You might not know someone. You might be an immigrant. You might be, you might be in some ways prevented from moving to the next stage economically, right? So you got to do that work, or there isn't work that you can do that isn't gig work, right? So you've low choice, or else you've no choice, right? In my view, particularly for what I'm talking about here, which is the lower paid gig workers. I'm not talking about software developers that can work anywhere in the world. They can name their price. They have high negotiating power, in my view. They can say, listen, piss off, I'm not doing that, and I won't get out of bed for less than €1,000 or dollars a day. So for those low choice, no choice, and I'm sure you can hear the passion in my voice here, Rob, and our listeners, in my view, the just cause around them is ensuring that they have adequate protections for them so that they're not shoehorned into these artificial contracts, they're not shoehorned into artificial contracts that deem them to be an independent worker when, if you look at it 6 ways different from Sunday, they're an employee and should be treated as such. So on that justice, Rob, do you have a view? I know you're not a lawyer. I'm not asking you to be a lawyer in this call, on this podcast, but what's your view around the social justice around those type of workers, and do you feel that they should be afforded at least some protections?
Counter argument, Connor, is that employers become nanny employers. They've gone way too deep and too far into the personal lives of employees. And I think a lot of that has been shaken out over the last 18 months. The use of family, all that type of stuff. So that's the other end of the spectrum. So I don't think that's right. I think the social contract of work, the psychological contract of work itself is up for question. Like in so many ways, on both ends, the no choice or low choice, and then the other end of the spectrum where there's like deep emotional commitment, which has just gone too far because it's not family, it's not a two-way agreement. And I think the mass layoffs have shown us that this last while. So I think how we identify with work, what it means to each individual, it needs to find them in their context. It's not always going to be a panacea or a solve like for every need that they may have. And there's one end of the spectrum that's it's not just. It's not fair. But I think that's the way of the world, isn't it? Like again, we're born. Luck is a huge part of so many different things. Where you're born, when you're born, and again, like there are so many stories of those who simply just get on to the ladder, and then you'll have people again on the other end of the spectrum who are like the shareholder supremacy. Anyone who has any type of a job, just you go to the hill working for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's capitalism. That's society. So I don't have any strong considered views, is the honest answer to your question, Connor.
Yes.
I don't talk in a broader sense. I deeply identify with the social justice of the whole thing. And again, I think there's been a rise of kind of like internal unions within like some of the most iconic brands in the world who are deemed to be some of the top 2% of employers.
That's right.
Yeah. So if people up there feel disgruntled, I can only imagine how that's amplified amongst the no choice, low choice cohort, you know? But no answer to your question.
Yeah. That's all good, Rob. I like part of this is just more discussion. I was eager to get your thoughts. One of the things, Rob, as you know from our many discussions, is I'm increasingly concerned about artificial intelligence, unintended consequences, let's say, and its potential, and I do use the word potential, negative impact on jobs, and jobs, specifically displacing jobs, right? And you've heard me talk about the horses and all that before, right? I won't bore our listeners with Vasily Leontiev's the hypothesis, right? But are you concerned around our artificial intelligence impact on things like social mobility, societal safety, and also its potential impact on jobs and creating less jobs?
Not as much as you. I think about it, like if I look at this through the purest lens I possess, which is that of like how will it impact my children, that probably gets to how I feel about it beyond like my commercial interests or whatever else. You know what I mean? So if that's what you want, it's going to be different. It's going to be a different world. Like I think the period of transformation will be the most difficult. Like it will find its will find its balance. I do hear you in terms of, like, there's a handful of people who now have significant influence beyond what any individual should ever have. There are companies who are more powerful than countries. So on a societal basis, you would have to wonder, and you would have to ask the question. And again, back to my own, the other side, if I move from my heart to my head, I think back to the skills agenda. So what skills do we possess to make sure that we can at least make good decisions? And ultimately, any decision in business or life is a decision with the information that's being presented to us. It's about your perspective. It's about your lived experience. And I think genuinely think there are skills that we can develop. So both like critical thinking, for example, to understand the difference between truth and logic. They're very different things. Like to understand the difference between emotion and passion. Very different things. Fact from fiction with the information that's been generated by AI. And the same goes for social media. So there are skills that are underinvested in that are easily learned, that will definitely help people make sense of what's to come and make ethical decisions. Like another example would be the process of decision making. And I've worked with Margaret Heffernan, the TED speaker and author, on this. She's one of my faculty, and we've a whole Skillstack on this, but she's taught me so much this last 12 months, Conor, and like the process of decision making to get a just decision. So we spoke about the ethics around the gig work economy. But if you involve a diverse group of people as possible to get perspectives, that's a very powerful force to help you think beyond your perception.
Yeah.
And if people are party to the process, quite often, even as they disagree with the decision, they'll at least make peace with the fact because they felt the process was just. And that's what gives legitimacy to decisions in all parts of our life. So there are skills like critical thinking, like decision making, that I think will help us make sense of AI and everything that AI generates and brings, to help us keep us on the straight and narrow and bring our people on the journey with us. So yeah, there's going to be challenge, there's going to be change. I'll be a little bit concerned about the components or elements from a job creation perspective that will evolve. Hopefully we can do more things that have greater impact. And again, it's the meeting of the emotional, natural intelligence that we have that's hopefully amplified by the artificial intelligence for the better, you know? So yeah, I see it slightly different to you, I think.
Yeah, I that's quite a hopeful message, though, and a really interesting way to think about it.
Want to counterbalance that?
No, I don't, because I don't, because I think it's worth exploring different viewpoints and different perspectives, Rob. And I actually really like that just decision making process, and that people are comfortable. I think, if I've interpreted this correctly, if the decision making has been just, fair, is about doing the right thing, I think people can accept that. I think some of your concerns, listen, it's fair to say, share them, right? And when you look at it through the lens of your children, then it's difficult, I think, for me anyway, not to be unduly negative about it, but I'm trying to change my perspective, Rob, by talking to you and many others on the show about this. And we had Andrea Wade, a mutual friend of ours, on the show from opening.io some weeks and months ago. And she really helped me think about this in a different way, very much like you've just done. So I think this is what I love about the show, the different perspectives and the intelligence and the people like you bring. So thanks for sharing that perspective, Rob. Rob, want to come on to one thing, and I don't know how long we'll spend on this, but at the moment, I think we're both working remotely, as best as I can tell. You're working, I think, from your home office. I'm working from my home office in the garden, but it's the home office, right? I say home office. It's a bloody converted shed with windows, right? It's not some fancy garden room, despite what my wife says. But anyway, that aside, in relation to remote work, Rob, I'm sure you've been following the discourse on social media, or maybe you haven't actually. Maybe you've got maybe you've stayed away from it, and rightly so, perhaps. But there's a discourse out there, really between two camps, that remote work is the best thing ever, and it's the only way to work. And then other people say, well, fuck, actually, hang on a minute, we need to get shit done. And in order to get shit done as an organization and get shit done effectively, we got to be together. And we got to be on premise. What's your take on remote work, Rob? Has it changed over the last number of years? And has it particularly changed since you've become a founder again, getting Skillstack off the ground here in September of 2024?
My perspective has changed. Kind of like, again, I think everyone has a personal view of what suits them. And then they have a view that suits their work context. So if you're a manager, if you're an owner, you'll voice what suits the business. But again, there's layers to that from an individual or company perspective. And if I chart it briefly, so what is broken? So when I think of an organization, I think of a brick wall. So the individual bricks being the human capital, the mortar being the social capital. And what happened when COVID hit is that we distributed the bricks. At what cost? I think we did at the cost of the mortar. And the mortar is what binds us. It is that social capital. It's what happens between us. And that looked different. Look at our screen. I'm looking at our screen now. I see two blocks and I see a black line between us. So that mortar is a very different thing. And it needs different ingredients for it to be successful. So I think we figured a lot of that out. And those who believed we were better together in office, they lower their voice because they're under huge pressure to keep people during the Great Resignation. And they, once again, found their voice, but it was framed differently. It was framed from a performance context because they had the cover of a tougher economy to force people back in if that's what they thought. Now, there's a whole kind of range of views on that, and companies that are known to have kind of mandated their folks back to office. So personally, I think sometimes I might double think, the 30-minute commute into town, whatever it might be, is just waste time. At the moment, it has suited me the last couple of months because I've had very intense, focused work to do in terms of building out a suite of content and like setting up a new business. But I've had pockets of collaboration with some of the most fascinating minds in the world. And I really valued the time I had in person with those people internationally. Developed a whole new range of relationships with people working remotely that I never thought I would have developed, to be very honest. So I see its potential. I see its impact on me as a person. I see the challenge stroke opportunity of being present at home. The challenge there is being present but not available. There's a bit of tension there. My sense is, like the acronym WFH, what's that stand for? It's like work from home, work from office. Like, how about just working from work? You know what I mean? But again, I mentioned this earlier, workplace, workforce. The work practice just needs to be considered. You know what I mean? And again, just dealing with a US client there recently, they put me on this kind of sequence of calls and a whole asynchronous way of working. I was like, man, this isn't like, I always want to ring somebody, like, call me old-fashioned. Can I just pick the phone? Do you know what I mean? I know that sounds a little bit kind of antiquated or whatever, but like even people of my vintage are saying, you still just ring people, just schedule calls. I was like, what's wrong with that? You know?
Exactly.
So a lot of practices are geared towards like even meetings now, you know what I mean? So like meetings, we go into discipline, 30-minute segments, and there's so many like mixed messaging now. If you meet someone for a coffee, it's like, okay, you can have an hour and a half coffee. Now, if you're being sold to, it depends if you're selling or buying. If you're selling, it's grand. If you're buying, it's not so great.
Exactly.
So there's so many work practices we need to iron out. But look, it's not going anywhere soon, is it? You know what I mean?
No.
So like there's some type of hybrid, I think, is what most people are asking for, and it's suiting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really fair comment. So, Rob, in turns during our conversation today, I've been inspired, motivated, fascinated. I've really enjoyed hearing about your journey. It's actually remarkable, and it's a pleasure actually for you to share that with me and our listeners. So, and I think the next stage of your journey is going to be absolutely fascinating, and I cannot wait to see how that develops. I think it's going to be really exciting for you. But I'd like to finish our conversation, if I may, Rob, with a question that we ask all of our guests, which is, what is your prediction or predictions for the future of...
What do I think? I think the tug-of-war of work will continue between employees and workers. I think any uncertainty drives the power dynamic to the employer, and we're certainly facing into that. I think what we're seeing playing out in society is a reflection of what happens at our workplace, and I think there's a lot of tension, a lot of hidden tension there. So again, it's much clearer, I think, in the US, for example, the conflict between diversity and expression, freedom of expression, freedom of voice. There's real tension there. So navigating those values conflicts is a very difficult thing. So I think that will continue for some time. But the polarization of society, the polarization of thinking, the polarization of politics, all of that is overlaid in the workplace. And I think we've been caught out, I think, a good bit this last 18 months, which I think will carry for the next couple of years around that psychological contract of work, around becoming nanny employers. I think that's all washing through. Asking our employees to bring all of them for work, and all of a sudden saying, don't bring your politics into work, don't bring religion into work. So the whole kind of diversity of our people will continue to be a challenge or an opportunity. Question of workplace, like we touched on, that will continue for some time. I think the generational thing will start to unfold a little bit. But I think there's so much noise around AI, and frankly, like, who's really using it that's materially different to a year ago, 2 years ago? Everyone's talking about like radical transformation. I think we'll see some tinkering around the edges. We'll see some leaps. But again, I think we've drastically overestimated the short-term impact, but possibly underestimated the longer-term impact. So I think it'll take longer to play out and affect people's day jobs materially. You know, there's a lot of hype around it. So I don't see that being a significant challenge, honestly, in the next 12 months at least. But yeah, I think efficiency, I think we'll raise the question of efficiency. I think we'll raise the question of talent supply chains. I think there are fundamental problems around recruitment models, for example. So again, like there's so much hope when an individual comes into an organization on both sides. It's like a new relationship, and like you can move to like a very passive, if not negative, relationship too quickly, in my mind. I think there's so much more we could harness around the setting our people up for success. Internal mobility, redeployment will continue. So the tug-of-war goes on. And again, it's a big question with loads of interesting facets. But the fundamentals of people, like all problems come here on top. Like all impact, momentum, decisions are made by people. That will always be what creates success, what creates value, what creates experience, and ultimately what unlocks success for everybody.
Wow. Rob, what a way to finish the show on that message of hope, optimism, and humanity. So Rob, I've loved our show. I've loved spending time with you. I always enjoy your company, both on the show today, but whenever we get together socially. I'm really excited for the future, for your company and for you and your family. And Rob, I wish you every and continued success, and thanks so much for giving up your time to come and speak to our listeners. It means a lot to me, and I can't wait to see what you do next. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Connor. And again, like I've had the privilege of spending time with you recently in the States, and we went over with a group of, again, like high impact entrepreneurs and executives and business owners. And for me, you were probably the standout impact in terms of how others experienced you in your presence. And I think that speaks volumes to the success of your business and you as a person. And congrats on I think you achieved the 100th episode there in recent weeks. So continued success with this. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah, really good to see it. And look forward to seeing what plays out for you as well.
Thank you, mate. And continued success, Rob. Very kind of you, mate. And so lovely to see you. Rob, best of luck for the launch this week and beyond. And I've no doubt you will smash it. So thank you, mate. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening to the Open Talent Report with Connor Heaney. If you found this podcast informative and engaging, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms.